Welcome to the Smart Business Revolution.
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 You want a revolution?
You say you want a revolution?
Revolution. The revolution.
It's going on right now.
Welcome to The Revolution, the Smart Business Revolution podcast, where we ask today's most successful entrepreneurs to share the tools and strategies they use to build relationships and connections to grow their revenue. Now, your host for The Revolution, John Corcoran.
All right, welcome everyone. John Corcoran here. I'm excited to be here. I'm the host of the Smart Business Revolution podcast, where I talk with CEOs, founders, and entrepreneurs of companies and organizations like YPO, EO, Activation Blizzard, LendingStream, many others. I'm also the co-founder of Rise 25, where we help to connect B2B business owners to their ideal prospects. I'm excited today because we've got an expert in online course work, which is something that a lot of people are thinking about now. How do you create a digital course? How do you create an online property? How do you take your knowledge and expertise and make it something that is digital that people can consume from anywhere? And so I brought Abe on here, Dr. Abe Crystal. He actually has a PhD in human computer interaction. He actually studied this stuff, and now he has a software company called Rizuku that for many years now has helped people and professionals and companies to create online coursework, to capture that expertise. So this is an incredibly relevant topic right now. We're going to be talking all about that. But before we get into that, this episode is brought to you by Rise 25 Media, which I co-founded with Dr. Jeremy Weiss. And our mission is to connect you with your best referral partners and customers. And the way that I do that, the way that I encourage you to do that, is through generating content, connecting with high caliber, intelligent people like I'm doing right now with Abe, and showcasing them, featuring them. It's one of the best things that I've done. It's an amazing networking tool. It's an amazing tool for delivering value to people in your network. And so I highly encourage it. And, because of doing this strategy, I've been able to connect and partner with companies from Salesforce, the Tony Robbins company. Even my business partner and I connected through podcasting. So if you want to learn more, go to rise25media.com. All right. So Abe, first of all, we hung out in person. It was a while back now. I believe in St. Louis, right? Through Josh Turner, our mutual friend. Mm-hmm. And excited to talk to you and pick your brain a little bit about this topic. So first of all, for those who are listening to the recording or watching it much later, we're recording this in mid-April 2020. Coronavirus pandemic is happening. And you have had a lot of people, I'm sure, who are thinking about for the first time how to create a digital course. What are some of the best practices? What are some of the mistakes and best practices that people make when they're dipping their toe into the waters for the first time to create an online course?
All right. Great question and a big question. So
not a small one.
Break that down a little bit. I think the first thing I would say in terms of approaching this is to think it, as we often hear in business advice, but it's really important, is to, think strategically and not reactively. So I think what's happening to a lot of people, whether you're a consultant, a coach, an author, or perhaps someone who's used to working with clients in person, right? A massage therapist, an artist. And suddenly you're in a world where you need to help your clients and work with people online. And it's natural to feel a sense of alarm or even a bit of panic about how to do that. And the first thought is like, how do I keep my business going? How do I replace my revenue?
Yeah.
And that's fine. And that's the imperative, and you have to deal with that. But it's important to step back and think about, okay, what's actually needed and what do people want right now? And what are your customers going to want to spend time and money on in this kind of changed world? So that's would be my first perspective on this, is to take a moment to reflect on, okay, who are your best customers and the customers you can best serve online?
And so would a good starting point be perhaps talking to those customers and figuring out what they would, maybe would you even approach some of your past clients and say, I'm thinking of creating an online course. What of everything I've done for you, what would be best to be included in there? Is that the type of research people should be doing?
Yeah, I think that would be great. And also looking at what are the problems you solve for people in person, and can those be addressed or at least partially addressed online, right? So if you are, we'll go with a couple of examples. I think it's very different depending on what type of business that you're in, right? If you're a consultant who's been doing in-person workshops that have suddenly been canceled, then you can start thinking about translating that workshop into an online format, but recognizing that it's going to be a very different medium, right? You don't want to take a full day workshop with a ton of slides and activities that people are supposed to do around a table and working with other people in person and try to directly offer that exact same content. Say through an 8-hour Zoom session is not going to be a good experience for people.
Right. So you have to rethink the way that you deliver this material. Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So thinking more with the end in mind, like what are the learning outcomes you might have been delivering in an in-person workshop? What would you need to provide online that would help people get to those same learning outcomes within the constraints, but also the opportunities that you have online? And usually that means breaking things down, right? Making them more structured and focused, but making sure to have opportunities for interaction that replace the interaction you would naturally have if you were doing it in the room with people.
Right. So continue. Other types of examples of businesses that are embracing digital courses?
So the sort of in-person workshop example translates fairly naturally, although it does take work to adapt. I think, where you have to get more creative is if your work involves something that's fundamentally physical or experiential, right? So like if you're a massage therapist, you can't give a massage online. That just doesn't really work. But what you can think about is what are the needs that massage is normally needing? And maybe you could creatively provide services that address those core human needs in some other way. So if massage for people is providing stress reduction, what could you provide virtually that would help people deal with stress, for example?
Right. That's great. Okay, continue.
So that I think that's really the core message is who are your customers that you can first of all reach online too, right? Because if your business is generally relying on local marketing, if you're getting clients through going out and giving talks locally, through local networking, through flyers on telephone poles around town, like these are all totally valid ways of getting customers in your local area. Those aren't working now. So first of all, you have to figure out who can you even reach online, right? Do you have personal contacts with past clients that you can reach out to them by email, by phone, by text,
to
get in touch with them and potentially interest them in something you're doing online.
So maybe for them, it's something different. Maybe for someone like that, it's something different that you're creating rather than something that you're creating that, if you got people through the old ways of doing things, you might create something different for those clients. But you bring up a great point because I know so many people and I've created a lot of online courses over the years. And, I know a lot of people who go out, they rush out, they get excited, they go and create something, and then it's crickets, or they don't know who to sell it to, or they don't know how to sell it. They don't know, they have no, pent up demand of people who are, they're waiting and, with their wallets open to pay for it. So in a certain sense, it's kind of a chicken or an egg problem, right? Where you have to have the demand and you have to have the supply. You have to have the both, you have to have, if you don't have a demand and people want to buy something from you online, then don't bother creating an online course. And if you create an online course and the demand isn't there, you're going to have the online course, but you're not going to have anyone to sell it to.
That's right. In the past, before working on Riziku, I had a consulting and training business, and we did in-person workshops. And so if I was running that now, like those events would all be canceled. And so probably what I would be doing if that was happening would be I would reach out to everyone who registered or had expressed interest in the in-person workshop and say like, hey, we're trying to adapt to the new reality. Can I get on the phone with you and chat for a few minutes about, what you were wanting to get out of the workshop and how we could, best support you, given that we need to meet online now. And I think first of all, a lot of people are adaptable and they'll be very open, to you reaching out to them and getting your input. And then remember, your clients need solutions now too, right? They still need help. And you want to adapt that to the current situation. So if you're B2B, if your clients are other businesses, they are probably looking for help figuring out how do they keep their business going? How do they adapt their marketing or whatever your expertise is? They're looking for you to help them adapt, to the current business situation. And then if your clients are individuals, then think about how have their personal goals and needs changed as a result of the situation. Again, in the massage example, are people suddenly under a lot more stress, and so they're looking for new ways to help deal with stress? Are relationships under strain that people need new ways to help nurture their relationships and so on.
Right. How did you end up in this line of work? How did you go from getting your PhD in human computer interaction to starting a software company around digital courses?
Well, the common thread is I've always just been really interested in learning and education, and that was a big focus of my academic research as well. And I'd always loved teaching, but I was also always kind of dissatisfied with a lot of the teaching that was done in academic environments and the lack of sort of innovation there and focusing on student needs. So I just got interested in what are ways that we can better help people, learn and develop. So part of that was experimenting with, like in-person education, like running workshops, trying to different ways to connect with people in person. And then some of it was, wow, there's so many people who want to learn online that can't even reach, in-person educational opportunities. How can we better serve them online?
Yeah. And how has the market changed and awareness changed over the years from when you started Rizuko to today?
Well, it's become a lot more mainstream. A few years ago, people who were doing online courses independently, as an entrepreneur, a blogger, a speaker, et cetera, it was rare and kind of cutting edge to be doing that. And now it's much more widespread and mainstream, and the volume of courses has grown dramatically, which is great, right? A lot more people are being served. For the course creator or the business side, it raises new challenges of how do you differentiate your work? How do you stand out? How do you reach customers when there are a lot more people trying to reach the same customers? And the bar that customers have for a course is much higher. It's no longer a novelty. It's no longer interesting to take a course just because it sounds cool.
Yeah.
People are really looking for results from a course, and they're looking for, proof and credibility that you can really help them with a problem.
Yeah, and that's a great point. And Bill Raymond has a question here, who was also I did a LinkedIn Live with. So, Bill, I'm going to get to your question in a second, but I just wanted to point out, I think there's this it may turn out that we view this time period as a watershed moment for online learning, digital courses. Mm-hmm. Just last night, my wife and I were talking about it because we got two kids who are school age, one in kindergarten, one in third grade, who are both having to do basically homeschooling now. Mm-hmm. And our school district, which is a great school district, really was struggled to get their legs beneath them at the beginning of this process when we had the shelter in place. And even to this day, it's a combination of a Google document and using the Seesaw app, which is an app that is on the iPad and on the computer. It's kind of clunky. Mm-hmm. And I was saying to my wife how, God, I wish that there was an online software program that was really kid friendly, that just took them straight through the process from A to Z, that kids could use intuitively and not struggle with. Mm-hmm. So, how do you see the industry changing from this experience of going through this, where so many, school age kids and also adults are having to engage in online learning for the first time? And then I'm going to get to Bill's question.
Well, I think that's a great example. And the deeper principle that it sort of comes to light there is that there's this concept of learning design, right? How do you design the experience to foster and facilitate learning? And when we're in person, you can be a bit more, let's say, informal or loosey-goosey with your learning design because you have the benefit of seeing people's faces, hearing their questions and their tone of voice, interacting with them one-on-one in small groups. You have a huge amount of bandwidth there where you can figure out, are people getting this or not? And you can adapt your teaching as necessary. Online, that all goes out the window. And so you have to really structure what you're providing to people and make sure that that structure is very carefully organized and facilitated. And that just doesn't come naturally. It's a skill to be learned. And for folks who've relied on in-person teaching, whether that's a kindergarten teacher or someone facilitating a professional workshop, there's kind of a leveling up to go from where you're connecting with people in person and relying on that high bandwidth experience to now connecting with people online, and your learning design becomes paramount.
Yeah, definitely. Bill Raymond asks, now Bill is an agile practitioner. He's a consultant. He helps companies with corporate trainings and helps them to use agile principles. And so he asked, what are some of the more popular campaigns you have seen customers run to sell corporate training programs? I guess you could also say, what are kind of some of the best practices for corporate training programs?
Yeah, so I think it comes back to the sort of evergreen principles that we talked about at the outset of really understanding who's the right customer for this and how do you reach that person. In terms of reaching corporate people specifically, I think the things that I typically see working are some of the classics: thought leadership, right? Having a strong point of view and interesting content in your specific niche. So in this case of an agile, coach or practitioner, I would be looking at what's your perspective or point of view on agile practices that's maybe a little bit different than how other people in the industry are looking at it. And, really sharing your perspective on that in places where people who need this type of training would come across it. And that may take some experimentation, right? Like, what is the right place for you? Is it LinkedIn? Is it Medium? Is it a specific professional association or industry blog? You may have to try different places to see, where you find the people that resonate with your approach. But there needs to be a place where people can find your thinking and say, like, oh, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about the problem in that way before.
Yeah.
And then, just the power of personal outreach, I think is often really underestimated, right? Like, you probably have a network of hundreds or thousands of people that you've built up over the years through conferences, different places you've worked, events that you've run. And just the good old fashioned of sending a very short but personal, note to a few of those people at a time, or, calling people that you've talked to on the phone before to catch up. Yeah, it's labor intensive, right? It's not like you're pushing a button and the leads come rolling in, but it works, right? People respond to people. That's something that you can just do. If you do a little bit of time consistently, it's not overwhelming and it will work over time.
Right. And I think some of the more interesting people who are using digital courses are using it as part of what they do, not a replacement, but part of what they do. Or maybe they're adding it as an additional add-on to services that they provide, where it's part of, or maybe it helps with speeding up client onboarding or something along those lines. Abe, this has been great. So ruzuku.com, ruzuku.com is the website. Where can people go in addition to there to connect with you, learn more about you, learn more about how to create their first digital course?
Send me an email. I'd love to hear from people personally. Abe@ruzuku.com. We can send an email to our whole mailing list today saying, hey, if you have questions, I'm here to help. So I'll extend that offer to anyone who's listening.
Awesome. And you have a 14-day free trial for people. So we want to go try it out and check out Ruzuku. I encourage people to do that. So great. Abe, thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you, John.
Thank you for listening to the Smart Business Revolution podcast with John Corcoran. Find out more at smartbusinessrevolution.com. And while you're there, sign up for our email list and join the revolution.
Revolution.
And be listening for the next episode of the Smart Business Revolution podcast.